Hello, welcome back to our segments on Microsoft Excel. Today we're going to be looking at cell formatting. So what you'll want to do before we get started is open up this document, which will be saved in your OneDrive, and copy the information in this spreadsheet into a new document. So make sure, as we've discussed in class a couple times now, go to your My Site under My Files, OneDrive, LRSD. Make sure you're using this one and not the O365. Just for this class purposes, we want to use the LRSD. Go to your ICT Resources folder, or I believe it's ICT Backup folder for you guys. Click New Document, create an Excel workbook, and title that Lesson 4-Cell Formatting, as you can see right here, just like mine is. So once you've got that open and ready to go, and you've got this document, make sure you copy these cells and place them into your document, because you cannot edit the version that I have provided you with, because that is a protected workbook. So, anyways, now we're here. What do I mean by when I say cell formatting? Well, when I say cell formatting, I could actually mean a lot of things. We're going to look at some fairly specific things right now. When I say cell formatting, I'm looking at the basic text in the cells and how the cells appear on your spreadsheet. Cells can be formatted for text in the same way that Microsoft Word is formatted. So if you take a look in your font box up here, you have the options to change your font size, whether it's bold, italicized, you can change it to underlined, you can change the basic color of the text, you can change the background behind the text. So there's lots of different things that you can do that are exactly the same as Microsoft Word. So when we look at this document here with all these numbers on it, it's a little bit hard on the eyes to actually look at. So oftentimes when you're helping yourself, when you often have to come back and reference a spreadsheet, or when you're helping others who are going to read your spreadsheet, it's important to highlight specific pieces of data that a person might have to look at, and it'll just help them navigate your document. So for example, these days of the week here essentially function similar to a title. So with titles, you often want to make the text stand out in some way. In this case, we're going to italicize them. So you can do this one at a time simply by selecting a cell, and selecting italicize, or you can select all the cells and hit italicize, and just like that. Now, right now, our cells just are a little bit too small in some cases, so I'm just going to widen them out a little bit so we can still see the full Wednesday. There we go. Now, the employee numbers here. These numbers are different from all of these numbers. This is like a title, almost along the left side of a graph that you would see. They're referring to individual persons. These might also be people's names, but in this case we're going with employee numbers. So what you want to do is highlight all those, hit bold so they stand out a little bit better. So already we're starting to get a little bit better ability to visually reference. Now we also have the actual titles. So we have employee number and we have transactions per day. So you'll see that transactions per day spills out across more than one cell. And it actually all takes place in this cell here, E3. Now if we wanted to fit everything in one cell, we could, of course, expand cell E to fit the title, but that looks a little bit silly. Suddenly this one is far wider than all the rest. So instead of doing that, we'll actually merge these cells. So if you highlight all these cells along here, this is going to become our title line. So you can click, there's a button here called Merge and Center. And it gives you a few different options in terms of how you merge your cells, but the most common one is to merge and center. So it creates a single cell out of all of these and automatically centers your text. Now I'm just going to expand this cell vertically so you can see a couple other things. In the Alignment tab, you're often used to having left align, center align, and right align. in Microsoft Word. But because we're dealing with a cell, which is a box, you also now have vertical alignment, where you can align it near the top, in the middle, or the bottom. So normally when we're talking about a title, you want it centered both vertically and horizontally. In this case, this cell's not going to be this big, but just interesting to note if you're ever writing text elsewhere. We're also going to increase the size of this because it is a title, so we'll increase it to size 16, and we'll bold it as well. And let's do that with employee number. We'll bold that, and we'll increase it to size 16. Now, it definitely does not fit, but that's okay. This one, though, we don't have to have it just stand out. One of the things about having this title is it could either apply to everything underneath it, or it could apply to everything to the right of it. And we don't want that to be a possibility. We don't want people to misconstrue that this title has anything to do with these days of the week. So what I'm going to do is delete it, or in this case I'm going to copy it or cut it. So I'm going to hit Control X just to get rid of it, and you can see it hasn't actually disappeared. There's just a funky lineup that's appeared around it. And on one of these middle cells, just to the left of my employee numbers, I'm going to hit Control V to paste it. Still doesn't make a lot of sense. That's okay. Let's make this cells, or these cells where the employee numbers are, we'll shrink them to fit. But when we're talking about alignment of text, text does not need to appear horizontally. Sometimes it makes more sense for a text to be vertically. So there is an alignment orientation button right up here in the alignment drawer, and it gives us a few different options. It can be angled, which is fine if you're doing a nice visualization for something. You can do vertical text like this, which I don't ever really recommend. It's actually pretty hard to read most of the time. Or you can actually just rotate the text up. Now, what we've come across, of course, is that this one set of cells, this entire row, has grown outsized. But this title applies to all of these cells from 101 to 116, or row 20 through row 5. So we're going to highlight this series of cells, hit Merge and Center, and now it's centered the text incorrectly. There we go. So we're just going to mess with the alignment. Now it's sitting in its own big box, but of course that's a little bit too large, so let's shrink that down until it matches in size. Okay, starting to get a little bit more understandable, and we'll shrink our cells down here as well. Okay, so now we're starting to have the semblance of some kind of table that serves as a purpose. Text formatting is not also, you don't always have to worry about making sure that your cells are merged. Sometimes it's not actually an option. So with our employee number 116 here, employee 116 hasn't had any transactions all week. So maybe I want to make a note, and there's lots of different ways to do this, but let's say I choose to make the note by writing in a cell. Once again, you can see this information spreads across more than one cell. If I really don't want to do that, if I might end up needing to use these cells at some point, that text is going to get occluded by me having something in this box. So we can use text wrapping. Text wrapping is an excellent function if you ever have to have multiple cells that have more than just a single word or string of numbers. You can hit wrap text, and what that does is it wraps the text into multiple lines. Still a little bit crushed for my taste, so we'll just expand this a little bit. We'll center it near the top, and probably left hand. And so now we've got multiple lines within a single cell. All right, what's next? Borders. Okay, so one of the things that you probably noticed when we were working in Excel previously was that we created a format. We highlighted our whole table, and or our whole group of data, and we said format as table. Now, if we go ahead and do that, doesn't quite work. It doesn't like the fact that we've got these merged cells. It just sort of messes with everything. So we're not using our auto formatting. We're just manually essentially drawing a table. So when we want to use borders for whatever uses, I'm just going to check my demo document here. Good. So whenever we want to use borders to define something, there's a whole bunch of different options. So we're going to start off by defining this entire thing as a single object, which isn't to say that we're selecting a simple option. We're actually just going to place a border. So here's the border box. If we pull this down, it gives us all sorts of different options for how we might draw borders. We might draw a border that's just a bottom border, which means only the bottom of our selection will have borders, top, left, and right. If we do all borders, it's actually going to also do all these lines inside, so like that, right? Which is okay, but maybe a little bit too much, a little too cramped. So we'll undo that. But what we will do is define this single object by putting thick outside borders. So we can see that this is the primary data that we're looking at. So we've got our thick border. And, oh yeah, so these ones, we're going to highlight these and we're going to place full borders around them. We're going to have separation and everything. We'll hit all borders. And so now that stands out as its own little thing. Now on these lines here, having lines sort of in between each column, or each row, is not quite necessary. It's pretty easy to follow along, but we want to vertically delineate that there's a new day. So for this cell, what I could do is go right border, and I could do it again. I could go right border. And I'd have to do that over and over and over and over again, all the way down the side to do some separation. Or I can simply select all of the cells in the list, hit right border, and a new border appears. And we'll do that again for each of our cells. Now if we went and did it 3 cells at a time, all that would do is create a right border along our selection. We don't want to do it just along our selection. We want to do it along each vertical column, so we're having to go and select each time around. With this one, we'll add a left border as well, just to separate it from the employee numbers. So make sure that your document looks like mine does right now, otherwise you're not at the same place. So take a couple minutes just to make sure that everything is hunky-dory. Next up, we will create just a little bit of a stylistic thing with each of these. We're going to create a bottom border for each of them. So it's almost like it starts off the line. It does create something that's a little visually a little bit more interesting. So I'm just repetitively placing bottom borders on each of these days. Okay, so there, you should be at the same place for all of these, and that's basically how your document should look at this point. Everything stylistically looks good, like it's pretty easy to read. There's nothing too crazy going on, and if you were to print this out, it would look exactly like this without the little lines in between. So very, very simple. But we're just talking simple today. We don't want to overload you with cell formatting, which can get very, very complicated. If you want to have more control, though, you can go to more borders. And when you open up more borders, it actually opens up the Format Cells dialog, which is by default in the Border tab, where you can start changing the size of your borders, you can change the colors of your borders, pardon me, but you can also change the alignment of the text and everything right from this dialog. Just gives you a little bit more control, doesn't force the auto formatting on you so much, and you don't have to go digging through menus. Anyways, that's it for this lesson. Very, very simple. Save this as your lesson 4 cell formatting. So you can see, if you want to see my demo document here, lesson 4 cell formatting. And not only save that in your My Site, but make sure that it has been added to the OneNote. And that's it for this lesson. We'll see you soon.